Hi and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 190. Don't ask me how I know. And today we're going to be doing the skeleton, but this time without the skeleton crew who is all on holiday. So I decided to run it solo so that the cycle can continue without a break, because once you do a break in something, and I should know, as the last episode I recorded was a month ago, once you make a break in something, it's really hard to come back to it. But don't you worry, I'm back to Magic Numbers. The break was just for me to regenerate a bit and catch up with my actual work. But I think next week on Saturday we're going to have another episode, and it's going to continue from there. But before we move into the actual episode, I would like to note that there are a couple of patrons joining me during my hiatus. And I'd like to thank John and Flawed Ghost for joining and supporting me. It's important because, financially times are tough and I put a lot of work into those. So it's always nice to have someone returning some of the gratitude, I hope. Or maybe some people torturing me by paying me to continue doing that. In either way, I'm grateful. All right. So, I don't have to introduce my guests. It's just little old me here as the sad, great, ugly goblin. And today I'm going to be going through building skeletons. We've done it a gazillion times, but if you're new here, instead of doing a card-by-card set review, we normally build decks. And these decks are just simple approximations of what we think a deck in a given color pair could look like. Normally we try not to put too many rares and mythics, so it's just between like 0 and 2, normally around 1. Between 0 and 10 uncommons in that deck, because uncommons are the new currency of the limited formats. And then we fill it up with commons with a small rule of we try to stick to maximum 2 of each. But this is very loose guidelines. And I would highly recommend you this kind of an approach to figuring out the new set. It is actually something I always do. I will normally play some sort of a draft simulator, either at 17 lands or draft sim, and play like a couple of dozen replicates of that, mainly by clicking on cards, but thinking while I do that. And this allows me to think about what's going on in the format, what do I see, do I find some weird interactions between cards that I think might be relevant. And it just lets me process the set much better than staring at individual cards, because I put them in the context of the pack when I have to make decisions. Oh, what would I pick here? Is this card better than that one? Now, obviously, I don't know it yet, but it helps me build this kind of a ground collection of knowledge and understanding of the format. And after several of those, I have like some plans that are starting to crystallize. And, I play 2-3 dozen of those, and I get a good idea of what I want to be building when I'm planning to build the skeletons. But before we move to the actual skeletons, I normally like to start with some fundamentals of the format. And this normally starts with the removal statistics. And this is a pretty weird set when you think about it when it comes to removal statistics. Because normally I have this collection of cards here on the graph. And normally very rarely I have something that deals 1 damage, and usually it's a big stretch of something that deals 1 damage. I normally have to choose between multiple things that can deal 2 damage. And in this set, there's nothing. There's nothing that deals 2 damage or gives -2/-2 to a creature. No Widow's Bite, no Saver, no Shock, no white deal 2 damage to target attacking creature, nothing. It just doesn't exist. And it's weird because around 70% of common creatures would die to that kind of a spell. And that is a lot. It's quite an unprecedented number. Normally, when we think about what you kill with a shock, absolute maximum is 60%. Normally, it's somewhere between 50 and 60. Here we have 70% almost of creatures that would die to a shock, and yet there is no shock in the format. There is Pinecone Strike, which deals 3 damage for 2 mana, and that kills 78%, which is also like above the normal situation. Normally it's around 65 to 70% of things that die to a lightning bolt. Also 70% of uncommons, which is quite a lot for uncommons at this level. So Pinecone Strike kills really a lot of things for cheap. And if there is one thing that this format is definitely missing, it's cheap removal. It's Pinecone Strike, it's Magnificent Ant, the white spell that can deal 5 damage to attacking or tapped creature, and then it costs 2 mana, but normally it costs 5 mana. And that's about it, because there are some cheap removal spells, but they kill creatures with power 4 or greater, which maybe is not necessarily what you want to be killing with your cheap removal, because your cheap removal, you want to kill cheap things with it, and 4 power hopefully is not on 2 drops, but as we'll see later, yes, it is sometimes. So we are looking at a format that just doesn't have a lot of removal, and all the removal that it does have is sort of bordering on unconditional, but because of that also more expensive. So yes, you would kill 83% of creatures at common with something that deals 4 damage, but the only thing that can deal 4 damage is the Stone Giant of High Pass, which is a 7 drop, so probably you're not really... I mean, yes, it will kill 4 damage creatures in the end, and it's a great card. I played in the pre-release, but it's not something that will happen early. We do have some relatively cheap, unconditional-ish removal, and here I saw showing Gnashing of Teeth. That's 3 mana, including 2 of it black, which again is good. That makes black removal hard to splash, because the other one, Bilbo's Sting, is also double black pipped. So you will need to have a significant chunk of your cards being black in order to play those two. And Gnashing Teeth kills 100% of common creatures, 95% of uncommons, and 87% of rares. So not far from being unconditional removal, and also for weird reason, and we will talk about it in a second when we talk about sweepers, it can also it can also give -1/-1 to everything the opponent controls. And then also, like, for 4 mana we have Burn, Tree and Fern, and it's a saga, and the first chapter is deal 6 damage to target creature an opponent controls. And that kills, again, 100% obviously of the common creatures, 97% of the uncommons, and 92% of rares. So really close to being unconditional. But this gap at dealing 2 damage remains. And I think that this is going to be, along with a couple of other features of this format, a defining thing for it. Lack of cheap removal is going to define how we play it. And also, and also we have some conditional removal, not a lot of it, but some of it. For example, Stone by Sunlight, that's white and 1 mana for modal spell. You can choose one, either destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. It's an instant, so can be relevant that it can kill this creature with power 4 or greater at instant speed. And the other option is until end of turn, target creature becomes an artifact in addition to its types and gains indestructible. And this kills 22% of creatures at low rarities and around a third of uncommons and rares. It does look like it's solid, especially with one deck specifically wanting to have creatures with power 4 or greater in black-green, which has Ferocious as its main mechanic. And with armies growing large, and even if it's not usable as a removal spell, it is usable as a combat trick that can be pretty good. So I think that this is going to be a pretty solid card, and those numbers don't reflect how useful it's going to be, because obviously the fact that it kills only a third of creatures is one thing. The fact that it kills a third of the most impactful creatures is another thing. There's a difference between something that kills 33% creatures but only targets small things, and a thing that kills only 33% of creatures but targets big things. Then we have Work Tactics, and that's another modal spell, another 2 mana instant, but this time in green. And you can choose one, destroy target creature with flying, or put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains trample and hexproof until end of turn. No indestructible, which is relevant, I guess. But it would have been a Pauper staple if it could kill, if it also gave indestructible. So yeah, this one kills very few creatures, 14% of commons, 8% uncommon, and 11% at rare. Middle Earth is not very famous for flying creatures. There are some, but not too many. But I think that we should be looking at this as a combat trick that sometimes kills a flyer rather than at kills a flyer that sometimes is a combat trick. I'm pretty sure that 80%, even if not more, of the utility of Work Tactics is giving the hexproof and putting a +1/+1 counter. And again, putting that +1/+1 counter sometimes is important because it lets creature cross the threshold of triggering Ferocious. So double use there. I think that's going to be potentially a very useful card in black-green decks. And then something that chat pointed out in the previous slide, that there is another spell that can deal 1 damage in Black Arrow. But I put Black Arrow in conditional removal because it actually kills more creatures than a 1 damage spell would, because of its clause that if a dragon is dealt damage, destroy it. So it's a thing that deals 1 damage that sometimes will kill, well, a couple of 5 drops at higher rarities, and I decided to include those special clauses, and because of that, it is a conditional removal. But Black Arrow is an flash equipment. When it enters, it deals 1 damage to any target, and if a dragon is dealt damage this way, destroy it. So there are a couple of dragons, couple of incarnations of Smaug in this set, and Black Arrow kills them straight away. Not to mention can go face. I faced that situation in my pre-release where I was left at 3 by my opponent, and I had the choice of either I pretty much stabilized, but I don't know, I was afraid of a flyer or something, and I could have cast the draw 2, lose 2 life spell, and I didn't. I cast the other option of it, which actually gave my creature +2/+2 and lifelink to stabilize even more, so that there was nothing that can be done to me, because I thought I was ahead enough that I didn't need to draw the cards. And after the game, opponent said, "Oh, I was so much hoping that you're going to draw 2 cards because I had the Black Arrow in hand." And there you go. Sometimes you're going to die to Black Arrow to the face. It's also a short sword at the end of it, so it gives +1/+1. Oh, sorry, reach, +1/+1, and reach, and equip cost is 1. I think that this reach might come in handy because flyers, despite not being plentiful in this set, can be pretty annoying because, again, because of the lack of them, you're not prepared for them. So in some decks, the Black Arrow might be actually quite important. And still kills like a quarter of the creatures, the common, 20% at uncommon and rare. But slim pickings in terms of removal. I had to really find some deep cuts like the Stone Giant of the High Pass or the front porch sentries in black, the creature that gives something -1/-1 when it dies. That's how deep I had to dig for finding any kind of damage-based removal. Plenty of unconditional removal though. It just comes at the cost of mana, which means that in most matchups, unless Pinecone Strike or the Magnificent End are involved, creatures in the first 2-3 turns are having a pass at the removal. And yeah, that makes me think that because of how the removal is designed in this set, at least in the beginning, in the first days of the format, the strategies that can do 1 drop into 2 drop into 3 drop aggressively are going to be way ahead than strategies that require containing this kind of curve out. And I think so for several reasons. First reason is I think that it's going to be relatively open, the cards that are necessary for those carve outs. They're not going to be super high picks. They're going to become super high picks later in the format. And because of that, people in the know are going to be capable of reaping all the rewards. Second of all, because there is just enough of the 1-drops and 2-drops that are impactful in this set, that especially in the 8-person pods, there's going to be too many of them circling, and multiple players will be able to get a sufficient amount of those. And also because obviously the containment strategies are harder to figure out. They're not going to be so intuitive. Curving out 1 to 3 is relatively easy. Containing a curve out requires already the knowledge of the format, which makes it that more difficult, and requires knowing which kind of interaction spells are important to do the containment and so on. So my prediction is that it's going to be very aggro format in the first weeks, and then we'll see how it evolves, because of course formats evolve. And also something that is I'm going to do, I'm not going to force you to do that because you do what you want, but I am going to probably start by playing pick 2 drafts in the first week or so, because I do think that in 8 people pods it might become problematic with how many copies of impactful commons you are getting, and it's going to be very samey, and I am pretty sure that, unless I'm horrendously wrong, that first week of the format is going to be a lot of black-red mirrors with exactly the same curve outs on both sides. But we're gonna see tomorrow. Well, actually we're gonna see in a couple of days. Also, there are some sweepers in the format. Settle the Wreckage. My second pre-release, I played against 2 Settle the Wreckage decks. It was laughable. People telegraph Settle the Wreckage so efficiently that you always know it's there. I managed to always play around it and didn't do much. However, I think that Corda Coles and Mark Anderson said it very well in their set review, that Settle the Wreckage is the card that has extremely good results against intermediate beginner players, because they just swing into it with no regret, and has very diminishing returns against good players who can see it telegraphed from miles away, and because of that will play accordingly and will force you to make difficult choices on when to cast it. So there is that. Weirdly enough, there are a couple of mini sweepers, and Desolation of Smog is rare, and it deals 3 damage to each non-dragon creature, which will kill a substantial part of all the creatures in the format, and then you get some mana that you can use to cast dragon spells, and might come relevant once in a while. But what is more important, I think, is Gloin the Mighty and Gnashing of Teeth. 2 spells that deal 1 damage or give -1/-1 to all creatures your opponent controls. It's a disproportionate effect, first of all. But I was fortunate enough to open 2 Gnashing of Teeth in my first pre-release, and Gloin and Gnashing of Teeth in my second pre-release, and I played against a blue-white deck, and it was laughable. All their hard work, doing the recruiting and discarding spells to get those 1/1s, and playing the 4-mana 3/1 flyer, and recruiting again, and making another 1/1, and I just untap, cast Easy Pickings, which is the adventure side of Gloin the Mighty, or cast Gnashing of Teeth for the second mode, and all their hard work is just neutralized instantly, especially in case of Gnashing of Teeth by a card that I'm anyway happy to play in my black deck. Gloin is maybe, not optimal. It's a 4-mana 4/3 that gives you 2 mana at the beginning of each first main phase. But I played in my second pre-release because I needed to fill my curve, and I thought, okay, at least it has an upside of completely wrecking one of the archetypes. And indeed, that's what happened in the game. I just completely wrecked one archetype by casting Gloin's Adventure and killing 4 creatures with that. Of note, also blue has the Bilbo, which is a great card but has 1 toughness, and there's several other 1 toughness things that this can get kill. Now, I don't think Gloin is going to be an amazing card, but I think Gnashing of Teeth is pretty solid as a -5/-5. So people will be playing it. If you're playing any blue-white strategy, you need to take that into account. Okay, and here's some creature sizing from the previous sets. It's very different when we add the big picture of the Hobbit set into the account. So here I have a graph with percentage of X2s among common creatures in each of the last sets since Kaldheim. I went really far back. And there is not a single set that is even remotely close to the Hobbit's fraction. 47% of common creatures are X2s in Hobbit. The previous record holder was actually Marvel Superheroes at 43%. And before that, SOS and Kaldheim at 39%. And before that, the highest was 35% or something. So this is like massively more than in any previous set. And in sets like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, there's 20%. Previous Lord of the Rings, 20%. Spider-Man, 17%. Now, okay, I mean, part of it is maybe because there are some mass things that are technically not creatures and with higher toughness, but are. But even taking that into account, 47% is a huge number. So 2 toughness is something that you need to deal with. And again, there is no thing that can deal with the 2 toughness. So it either has to be dealt with by you having larger creatures or by removal that costs more mana than probably the creature that you're killing. And that's going to be, I think, a defining feature of this format, is that a lot of the time removal is going to be bad. And I'm not saying that against every matchup removal is going to be bad, but definitely that's going to be a problem. And this might have a knock-on effect on other things. Like, for instance, there is the 2 mana target creature gets +3/+0 and first strike as a combat trick. And normally this card would be horrendous, but maybe it's going to be actually playable. I didn't put it on any of my skeletons, but I think that if you don't have cheap removal, maybe this is the removal. You play a combat trick. So maybe the combat tricks are going to be slightly better than they normally are. In the chat, I already see that they really like the 2/2 first strike attacking dwarf because it attacks into a lot of things with no problem. And maybe that's the case. I played it in my red-black decks and it was absolutely fine. And this, again, the fact that there's lots of X2s means that there's got to be fewer X3s, for example. And this is another graph that starts at Kaldheim and ends at Hobbit. And you can see that not a single set before Hobbit had fewer than 10% X3s among common creatures, and Hobbit is at 8%. Before that, the lowest was 15% at Duskmourn. And we have 8% here. And some sets had like 35%, like Tarkir Dragonstorm. Okay, that one was a special one with all the dragons. Or Spider-Man also had like 33% of X3, so now we have only 8%. And the same number when we look at the X4s in this set. Only 6% of creatures are toughness 4, common, have toughness 4 exactly. And this, again, things like Mutant Ninja Turtles and OTJ, they had around 25-23% of those creatures. Average is probably around 14-13. Here we only have 6, not a single set under 10% before that, with Marvel Superheroes being 10%, and Streets of New Capenna and Crimson Vow, if you remember those. So definitely we're talking about a set that is unique in the creature sizing and unique in the composition of the removal. We're going to see how it plays out, but my strong feeling, and I'd like to repeat it, is that it's going to promote hyper-aggressive strategies. And with that mindset, I went to pre-release twice, I built a Black Red deck twice, and I 3-0'd 6-0'd twice. It is a pre-release. Obviously, you're going to be paired up with different levels of players. Some of them were still the beginners, but still I think like a curve out of a 1-drop into attacking for 3 in turn 2, and there's millions of ways to do it in this format, is not going to be uncommon. You're going to be seeing it time and time again. And I think that the key of solving this format is going to be either how to make those curve outs most efficient, how to end the game if you didn't go through with all the damage and you leave opponent at low life total, or how to stop those curve outs from being painful. And this is the mindset that I had in my mind when I was creating those skeletons. And I have more or less confidence on some of those builds, and the least confidence I have is in the blue-green. I built something, I'm not sure if it can work, and I'm not sure how can it work. And I didn't want to go all in on the hot takes because I had some ideas, but I'm gonna flag them rather than just blatantly state them, because not everyone is a degenerate and knows all the keywords in the set yet. But we do have storied, which is a new keyword, and it's centered around white-red. It's like City Blessing, but counts artifacts, legends, and sagas, all of which are present in the set. Just before you're wondering, there are sagas, there are legendaries, and there are artifacts. And it will give some effect. Once you get your storied, it stays with you forever, and it has some effects that will be stated exclusively on the card. So for example, Ori, Keeper of Songs, is a 3-mana 3/3, and as long as you have Enduring Story, which means you had at some stage of the game 3 legends, artifacts, and or creatures and or sagas on the board, it gets +1/+0 and has Vigilance. So it's a 4/3 Vigilance, which is a fairly annoying creature, by the way. Or we have Dine, which is a 2-mana Vigilance 2/2 with Storied, and as long as you have Enduring Story, creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. So it's got like a mini propaganda. And yeah, each storied creature will do something different, so you need to read on the card. But once you get your storied triggered, so you have a storied creature and 3 things that fulfill the criteria, you get your Enduring Story, and it stays for the rest of the game. And I just checked the numbers. Around 38 cards across white and red tick at least one of those boxes. It's important, ticking both boxes. A legendary artifact does not trigger story twice. But there are also treasure makers. There's some things that make an artifact equipment. So it should be relatively easy to trigger if you need to trigger it in the red-white deck. And most of the time it's going to be a small effect. So it's basically like a bonus for being specifically in white-red, because it's easier to trigger the storied when you're in white-red, because the dwarves are in white-red, and that means that the bulk of legendary creatures at lower rarities are in white-red. So that's storied, and it will happen regularly, and you don't even have to think too much about it. It's just gonna naturally happen most of the time. Okay, next new ability is Recruit. And this one centers around white and blue. And it's at 10 cards, 4 commons, 3 uncommons, and 3 at a higher rarity. It is basically Connive, but when you discard a non-creature spell, non-land spell, you will make a 1/1 token instead of +1/+1 counters. So, for example, Patient Instructor is a Vigilance, and when it enters Recruit, which means that when it enters, you draw a card, then you discard a card. If you discarded a non-land, then you make a 1/1 on top of everything. So it supports going wide. It supports going through your deck, filtering cards. There is a bit of flashback, for example, in the set, so you can discard a spell with flashback and then get it from your graveyard. It also will support flooding in a way. If you're playing a Recruit deck, because you're recruiting several times, and you want to discard the non-land things, you're gonna end up with a lot of lands. So I don't know exactly what to do with that knowledge, but there are several ideas. One of them is playing 16 lands, for example. And then, because normally when you're looting, the idea is that if you're looting, it's better to play more lands because you can always loot them away and you're going to still get your spells and you want to cast your spells, so you're going to put more lands in your deck. But with Recruit, heavily prioritizing you to discard non-lands, maybe the reverse is true. You put more spells because you can always loot them away while getting the lands that you need to cast your spells. And because of that, you can maybe play 16 lands. But I don't know. I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure. I don't want to give you the wrong impression. I just want to give you an insight to what my thoughts are on that mechanic. And it can appear on multiple things. It appears on creatures, but it can also appear on enchantments like Celebrate the Mountain King, which is an Oblivion Ring with Recruit. And then there are a couple of mass pump effects at common that might help Recruit decks to push the damage through. So the idea is that you go wide while surviving the aggression from other decks and then finish off with the mass pump effect that will kill the opponent. But there are several problems, and one of them is that there are no tools to stop aggression from the opposing side efficiently. And also there are those two X1 sweepers at lower rarities that I mentioned, the Gloin and the Gnashing of the Teeth, which will be disastrous, especially with the thing like Long Lake Nuisance, which looks great. It's a 4-mana 3/1 flyer that recruits on ATB, so you get basically a 3/1 flyer plus a 1/1. It looks great. If an opponent has this sweeper, it's just a disaster when they cast it when you have a Long Lake Nuisance on board. So you will need to think hard about committing too wide to the board in the later game, for example. There is another new ability called Hone, and I mentioned it because it's a new ability and those should be mentioned, but it only exists on 2 cards and both of them are rare. Dwalin Weapon Master and Stink Bilbo's Sword. Hone counters are counters you put on equipment, and that equipment, on top of what it's giving, is giving a +1/+0 more. So if it was a longsword that gives +1/+1 and you put a Hone counter on it, now it gives +2/+1. And if you put 2 counters, +3/+1. And it seems like a cool build-around mechanic. There are those 2 rares, but maybe if you play them, you can sort of adjust your pick orders. So for example, Dwalin has, whenever Dwalin attacks or enters, put a Hone counter on each equipment you control. That's a big boost, and it's a 2/1 first striker. And then, of course, you can equip Dwalin, attack with it, with any equipment really, and it becomes like 5/1 first striker, 5/2 first striker. So it can quickly spiral out of control. And I think that, yeah, those decks with the Hone can work pretty well in white-red, obviously, but also in white-blue. In white-blue, because any stupid equipment will give you like +3, +4 power, and you have a lot of 1/1 tokens, which means that you can start attacking with your equipped 1/1 tokens. They have to block because they are now 6/1s or something, and then you can re-equip and leave 1/1 to block, and it kills anything, and it can become problematic for your opponent to deal with your creatures that are imbued in this way. And I played against one of those decks in the pre-release, and I think my opponent punted and did not attack aggressively enough with re-equipping their 1/1s, and in the end I managed to stabilize. But it was a tough game, mainly because they had a fast start, and then the equipment and the 1/1s added up into quite a good late game for them. And I think that if you're playing either white strategy, this can be one of the ways of looking at it. It's I do damage early and then finish off with massive equipped creatures. Hone counters will only speed up the process, basically. And then there is one returning mechanic that spans all the colors, which is Adventure. There is a bunch of creatures or enchantments that have Adventure on them. Creatures or artifacts that have Adventure on them. 17 cards across all colors. Majority of them are legendary permanents. And you need to really evaluate them case by case because they have very different play patterns. For example, Bilbo Baggins Burglar is a 3-mana 2/1 that draws a card on ETB, and the adventure is blue for sorcery to scry 2. So obviously you want to be playing the scry adventure on turn 1 if you don't have anything else to do, and in blue you're likely not to have anything else to do because blue doesn't have a single 1-drop. But Bilbo Uncommon version, the adventure costs 5 mana while Bilbo costs 2 mana. So there you will have to think how you're going to play those things out. And yeah, you will need to evaluate them individually as a card rather than looking at the mechanic. The mechanic doesn't have too much to do, and also in the context of the archetype. So for example, I think that Gollum Silent Slinker, and I know there's no T in that word, it's a slinker, has a black meager meal adventure, 1 mana cost. You put a +1/+1 counter on a creature and target player gains 2 life. This adventure is going to be, I think, potentially solid in green-black. I'm not saying this card is going to be amazing, but in green-black decks, you can put the counter on something that is just short of being 4 power, and therefore making it ferocious. And then you can cast Gollum, which also is a 4/3 with Menace, and that also will trigger ferocious, which means that it sort of can enable 2 things to enable ferocious, which I think is pretty decent for what the deck is trying to do. Smaug, that thing I think is going to also be pretty solid. It's a 7 mana 5/5 flyer, so this looks like very much underrated. But it does have a 5 mana deal 5 damage to target creature sorcery adventure. So I think that the main mode of Smaug is literally dealing 5 damage to something, and then as a reward you're drawing this 7 mana inefficient dragon, but it's free real estate, so you're happy to play it. And I played it in both of my pre-release decks, and the removal was great, and sometimes I managed to cast the 5/5 dragon because the opponent was not dead yet. But a lot of the time, they were already dead by the 5 mana deal 5 to something adventure because their whole livelihood was hanging on a thread of a creature that of one big creature that was stopping me from attacking. Right. In terms of mana fixing and ramp, there is some of it, but I'm not sure if that ramp that we have is actually useful for anything. Like ramp maybe yes, but fixing I don't think it's useful because that doesn't look to me like a set where you want to really splash. In one of my pre-releases, I did splash because I was playing black-red because I'm a simple creature, and I opened the Golgari 5 mana troll. And I played against that card the day before. I knew it's absolutely broken. And I thought, okay, I have 2 evolving wilds and 1 thing that makes a treasure. It's a very cheap splash. Doesn't cost me anything. I just put 1 forest. And I'm going to play with my Will, Bert, and Tom. And it worked very well. So there are very few cards like that. A lot of the other cards are either double pipped or so synergistic that splashing them doesn't give you much power. So I don't think that it's a format particularly conducive to 5-color decks. However, I might be mistaken. Maybe there are some strategies that are actually quite good. There is, for example, Thranduil at Rare or Mythic, which is a Sultai-colored elf, and maybe that's something that you want to be putting in your deck. So yeah. Ramp, on the other hand, might be pretty useful because that will help you deploy large things that will stop this aggression of super aggressive decks. And I mean, I still am not sure how it's going to work out because obviously I didn't play enough replications. But if there is any hope for blue-green, it's in the ramping. And there is an elf that for 2 mana is a 1/2 with vigilance, and whenever an elf you control enters, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and then it taps for X mana of one color, but you can only spend it on elves. For constructed, I understand why this is so. In limited, I think it would have been the only hope for blue-green deck would have been if this could cast anything that is not an elf, because I don't think that there's enough elves in this format to do so. I think still it looks like a solid card, and I think that it can lead to some kind of explosive elf starts that will maybe help stem bleeding early enough, but remains to be seen. There is Wood Elves, 3 mana 1/1 that brings a forest into play. Again, I'm not sure if that card is going to be playable at all, but it has a couple of things that I think are nice about it. And one of them is leaving this 1/1 body. And not because the 1/1 body is relevant, but I think that 1/1 body is a good protection from the card that can be Scourge of all the larger creatures decks, which we're going to talk about in a second when we talk about the skeletons. There is also some treasure synergies. There is Dory, that 3 mana 3/2 that with trample that comes with treasure, and there are a couple of cards at higher rarities like Bejeweled Warg, a 3/2 trample that when deals combat damage you can make a treasure. Most likely you put a +1/+1 counter on target wolf you control, but hey. And there are Sackville Bagginses that when they enter, you sacrifice a creature, draw a card, and make a treasure token. Interestingly, there is this massive 5-card of fixing and ramping in colorless. The Updog, long-bodied grey dog, 3 mana flash reach, 2/2. When it enters, creates a tapped treasure, is one of those. There is the Old Thrush, 2 mana 1/2 with flying. When it enters, you gain 2 life, and you can put a basic of your choice on top of your library. There's Thror's Map. When it enters, you search your library for a basic and put it in your hand. And also 2 and a tap you loot. There's Ponies. That's a 2 mana 2/1. And for 2 tap and sacrifice the Ponies, you search your library for up to 2 basic lands. You put 1 in the battlefield and 1 into your hand. And there is Giant's Boulder, a 1 mana artifact that when it enters you scry 2, which is fixing. And then 1 in a tap, you filter a mana. And 7 in a tap, you destroy, and sacrifice it, you destroy target permanent. Of note, I think that Giant's Boulder and Thrower's Map are also things that you actively want to return to your hand. And there are some blue-green cards that want to return cards from the battlefield to your hand for bonuses. So I will be looking at those 2 speculative picks for some of the decks. But the question to me remains is like, what am I splashing when I play those cards? What do I put in my decks that will be so good to splash? I think that Troll that I mentioned was an excellent splash, but I managed to do it off 1 forest and just basic and basic collection of lands. Talking of lands, not much there. There is 5 dual lands for each faction, and they all sacrifice for 4 mana, so 2 and black-green in case of Mirkwood, which is the Golgari one. To put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature of the type that is supported by this color pair. So elves in Simic, goblins in Rakdos, or orcs, dwarves in Boros, humans in Azorius, and bears, spiders, or wolf in Golgari. And I think that normally we get those lands that do, I don't know, Surveil or Scry. These ones put counters, and this is another thing that sort of points me towards very aggressive decks. Because in Strixhaven, Secrets of Strixhaven, those lands would be useless. Like, why would you even put a counter on the creature? No, you want to Surveil, you want to Scry. They wouldn't be very useful in ability, and those lands would have been significantly worse because their ability would be useless. if those lands are good, and I do think that they are, and especially the black-red and then white-red, if they're to be good, well, it's all about aggression in the creatures. So I think that, yeah, the design points me towards combat-centric, creature-centric format here. On top of that, we have two types of evolving wilds. Elven Passage is a tap, pay 1 life, sacrifice this land, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle, and you may behold an elf. So if you have elf in your hand or on the battlefield, you can untap that land, which makes it pretty good then. You still have to pay 1 life, which is not nothing. But I played it in black-red deck without any elves in it, and it was also fine. Especially that I didn't care about losing life because I was draining my opponent too fast. And Hobbit Hole is the evolving wilds for this set. It doesn't tap for mana, so it only sacrifices to fetch a basic and return it to the battlefield tapped, obviously. But it has Halfling Cycling 4, which means that for 4 mana, late in the game, you drew your Hobbit Hole, you have enough mana, you don't want to do anything else, you can always cycle it and search for a halfling, of which there are 9 in this set. 3 in blue, 3 Bilbos, 4 in the black, Gollum is a halfling, and there are 3 Gollum cards, and there are Sackville Bagginses. 1 in white, Belladonna Took, and 1 in green, the Notary Hobbits. Realistically, though, most of those cards that are high rarity, so realistically, only blue and black decks will have common halflings in Gollum and Bilbo. Bilbo being a great card that also draws a card and scries on top of that, so maybe worth cycling your Hobbit Hole. And Gollum, on the other hand, if you have a couple of Hobbit Holes, maybe, just maybe, it's actually worth thinking about putting this Gollum Silent Slinker into your deck so that you have a target for Hobbit cycling. But it's worth keeping in mind, these are very small advantages. Okay. There are also gold cards, and in terms of cycles, each color pair has a hybrid common, like this Patient Instructor here. Signpost uncommon, which is most of the time a legend, but in Elf's case, it's a non-legendary creature. Here we have Bard the Bowman, 1 white blue for a 1/3 reach. When you draw your second card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains lifelink until end of turn. Yeah, which looks pretty good to me actually, after playing a bit more. I think this is especially the lifelink part. Then there is a uncommon hybrid for the supported pair. In Azorius, it's Eagle's Rescue, 2 Azorius hybrid for an aura. Target creature gets +2/+2 and has flying. And you can cast it from your graveyard, sort of. But then it can only enchant a creature with power 1 or less. And then each color pair will have a rare company that is specifically giving some bonuses when you have creatures of the type that the company is about. So Bard's Company is 2 white blue. You may cast this spell as though it had flash if you control a human, which in white blue, you probably are going to control a human of some sorts. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. When this creature enters or attacks, recruit. So you make hopefully a 1/1, and that 1/1 is a 2/2 also at that time. So yeah, a nice 4 mana for 5/4 of stats, potentially with the looting attached to it. And potentially also a bonus to your other humans already there. And on top of that, there are 6 rare or mythic key characters. So there is like a rare Smaug, there is the Thranduil, there is the mythic Bard, there is Great Goblin at rare, there are the trolls that I mentioned, the Bird, Tom, and whatever. And there is Dwalin, which we also saw, the one with the home counters. So there is several gold cards in the set. But nothing that doesn't touch the supported color pairs, apart from one exception is Thranduil, which is Sultai. This is the only exception from the rule in this set, the only card that is not strictly in the supported color pairs, which makes me think a lot of the game is going to be in the supported color pairs. Although I can foresee that once in a blue moon you're going to get, I don't know, a red-green ferocious deck. Something like that. Mana is going to be tough though. Okay, and now we can move on to the actual archetypes and the skeletons. So let's start talking about the archetypes, and let's start with the black-green. And the theme of the black-green is ferocious wolves and spiders and bears. But wolves, on paper at least. It's all about the Mirkwood creatures, for those of you who are Tolkien fanatics. The creatures that live in the Mirkwood forest. And yes, there are some bats and bees. The bat was pretty good, but I played it in red-black though. So as I said, there will be a common signpost, uncommon signpost, common hybrid, uncommon hybrid, and a signpost. The common is the Duskwatch Hunter. So 2 Golgari hybrid for a 3/1. Can't be blocked by tokens, which is great, because a 3/1 with a recruit set is laughable. You see, the design team knows that making a 3/1 in a set with recruit makes it laughable, because everyone will block it on their recruit 1/1 soldier token. And yet they don't understand that gnashing of teeth is the opposite of that, and it makes mockery of those 1/1 tokens. Anyway. But what is more important in this creature, when it enters, you can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. And that target creature can be itself, which means it can be a 3 mana 4/2, which means that it's a good way of triggering Ferocious on turn 3. And if not, it can make attacks viable by putting a counter on something that otherwise did not have a viable attack. Large Bear is 5 mana for a 5/5 Reach Trample Haste. Perfect creature, if you ask me. Just does everything I want to be doing. Is big, can block flyers, has trample, and will come out of nowhere. Just very much like Bear. And the signpost is Chief Warg. 4 mana in Golgari. 3/3 Menace. And it has Ferocious. Whenever you attack while you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you draw a card and lose 1 life. First of all, it doesn't have to attack. Second of all, put a counter on the Chief Warg and it triggers Ferocious by itself. So it's a good value engine that can help you to grind the game that you were slightly falling behind in. And yeah, because it's Ferocious and there is, I think, sufficient number of creatures with Ferocious to actually care about it, but not at all costs. But I think that there are several important enablers. The Duskwatch Hunter is the first one of them that we saw, but it's one of the signposts. I think the most important card for this one is going to be the Desolation Prowler. 2 mana 2/2, and you can pay 2 life. This creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Activate only once each turn. This card is a beating. I played with it. I played against it. Both of the things. One of them is pleasant and one of them is unpleasant, which is a good signal that the card is good. Casting it on turn 2 allows you to instantly trigger Ferocious, and there are some cards that actually are happy to have the Ferocious triggered even that early, even at the cost of 2 life. And then you can trigger it at will. Also, it will be unblockable, and if it doesn't get blocked, you probably still want to activate it in many games. So a lot of good things about it. And weirdly also pretty decent blocker, because you can just leave it to block and they cannot attack into it unless they have a trick. And if they attack into it, you know they have a trick, so you can act accordingly. Another enabler, Ordinary Bear. Yes, it's a vanilla creature, but I think it's a playable vanilla creature. I'm not saying that it's one of the top commons or anything, but I think it's a serviceable, ferocious enabler with 4/5 of stats for 4 mana. Even if they point the removal at it, removal is not that plentiful, which means they waste one of the important resources to kill an ordinary bear. And a lot of the time, that removal will be either unavailable because people are curving out, or sorcery speed. And then Ordinary Bear will still get you one Ferocious trigger if you need it, because you will play it pre-combat, attack, get your triggers, move on with your life. Another enabler is Troll Negotiations. That's 2 green for a sorcery. You put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature you control, and that creature fights target creature an opponent controls. So it's a fight spell, but boosts your creature from 2/2 to a 4/4, say. And then, of course, when you boost that creature, it also starts enabling Ferocious. That's one of the things that can do it. There is another one we're going to talk about when we talk about my skeleton. And of course, when you have enablers, then you better have some payoffs. And I think that 2 payoffs are absolutely paramount for the deck. One of them is Nighthowl Pursuer, black, just 1 mana for a 1/1 with Menace, and Ferocious. When this creature attacks and you have a 4/4 or 4-tap power or more creature on board, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So if you play Nighthowl Pursuer on turn 1, and on turn 2 you play Desolation Prowler, you can activate Desolation Prowler in your main phase, attack with the Nighthowl Pursuer, and it becomes a 3/3, and you swing for 3 on turn 2. Then on turn 3, you again activate the Prowler pre-combat, and then you attack for 7. If you're on the play, and opponent is not a Pinecone Assault gamer, what is the opponent going to do? 3/3 Menace and a 4/4 attacking them when they only had 2 mana to use in the game. There's not much they can do, and you still have 3 mana to play around with. So this kind of a curve out is going to be absolutely backbreaking, and there is more of those curve outs. Because the other absolutely key card, I think, for this archetype is Nasty Little Rabbit, which is a green, again 1 mana only, for a 1/2. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. It's not as impressive as the Nighthowl Prowler with Nighthowl Pursuer with the curve out, but if you play Rabbit turn 1 and then Desolation Prowler turn 2, activated pre-combat, Rabbit becomes a 2/3 and gets closer to being a 4-tap power itself. When it becomes a 4 power itself, it will trigger itself, because it doesn't say if you control another creature with power 4 or greater. No, you just need to control a creature with power 4 or greater. And the third payoff is the Wargling. That's a 2-drop, and it's a 2/2 and has Ferocious. Whenever this creature attacks while you control a creature with power 4 or greater, until end of turn, this creature gets +1/+0, and creatures you control, all of them, gain trample. And this is like great creature to play early, start doing some damage, and then later in the game, it lets your board become unjumpable. Everything can attack, and you will push some damage through. So this is a great way of like finishing the game. And there are some cards that I think are going to be quite important for those decks. Gnashing of Teeth, I think it's good because against other big decks, you can kill the big thing, and against decks that generate a lot of small blockers in search for late game, Gnashing of the Teeth purges them, and you can basically continue attacking with your bigger things and forcing them to trade their engine pieces, for example. I think Work Tactics is another key card. Since you have not that many Ferocious enablers, Work Tactics lets you protect it and will occasionally deal with the flyer. And I think Utter Cup, 2 mana, 2/1, Reach Death Toucher with Landfall. When a land comes into play, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. It can be a beater in the beginning, but I think that this is a key card against decks that are more aggressive than you. And despite me highlighting those 1/2 curve outs that are just perfect, obviously those are not going to happen every game. A lot of the time your curve outs are going to be tap land into just a random 2-drop into maybe a 3-drop. And then if that 2-drop is Attercop, that at least helps you to stem the bleeding from aggressive starts from red, white, or red-black decks. Also, Attercop works very well with Quarrel, the bite spell for the set. And here is the deck that I built. And obviously, I do think that especially in 8 people pods, when you see multiple copies of those cards, you should be open to seeing them early and picking them early, because these will be responsible for the most oppressive starts that you can have. So I have the Nasty Little Rabbit and Nighthawk Prowler 1 copy because they're uncommon, but I can imagine decks that will have 3-4 copies of those, and these are going to be the ones that I'm going to be seeing in the trophy channel of my Discord, which you can join for free, by the way. There is a link somewhere there in my Twitch. Then, obviously, Desolation Prowler is the second part of that riddle. This allows for the super explosive starts. But I also have the Uttercop. I also have, being old, something Warg, Ravaging. Oh, God. That's like, I need to change my glasses by now. I think it's Ravaging. I don't see a G there. There is a Warg of sorts, and Uttercop and Wargling. All those 2-drops are just gonna be there to service for your early game. At 3, I have a package of creatures that can trigger my Ferocious. And Duskwatch Hunter is one of them, because it can be a 3-mana 4/2 if you need it to be. But another thing that I have is Mirkwood Pathmaker. That's the elf. It's a 3-mana XX, where X is the number of lands you control. And yes, on turn 3 it's going to be a 3/3, but next turn you play a land and you untap with a 4/4 that can attack, and you can drop another 4/4, which gives you double insurance for not having your Ferocious synergy blown out. Or you can play the Chief Warg and then attack with your 4/4 Pathmaker, draw a card, and make sure that you get into the late game. So I think that these are important. And then Ordinary Bear, I put 2 copies of it because I think it will be easy to get them. And they do trigger Ferocious, and they are chunky, as a bear should be. I also have a large bear and a Bjorn the Fierce as my bomb, just to highlight that this is a broken bomb. So you have like a mini bear package, which actually can mean that you can play little bear in those decks as well, for some reason. But I would like to draw your attention to my removal package, because I think that a card that I on purpose didn't mention till now is Crude Bent Blade. 3-mana equipment. When it enters, target opponent sacrifices a creature of their choice. This card is going to be backbreaking against literally sort of your deck. When there is some trading in the beginning and you're left with the Ordinary Bear, an opponent casts this thing, and then you don't have an Ordinary Bear. It gets sacrificed to the blade. So if you're playing games against decks like that, this is going to be an excellent removal. And sometimes it's going to also open up attacks for you. And a small but key part of it is that it leaves behind this +2/+1 equipment. +2/+1 turns almost every creature that you have in your deck into a 4-power creature. And it only costs 2 to equip. So you put this thing on a Wargling, and all of a sudden the Wargling attacks as a 5/3. You put this thing on a Nasty Rabbit with 1 counter, and the Nasty Rabbit is now a 4-power creature, gets another counter. So I think that Crude Bent Blade can be a key piece of interaction that on the play helps you to curve out and get rid of the opposing creature. Later in the game, it makes sure that even if you draw one of your early things, that still can trigger Ferocious. And we also have like Quarrels and Bilbo's Deadly Slices, and I put 1 down to Goblin Town. Even though probably not the best is just making the Amass 1 because we don't have other Amass things. However, there is maybe this great ugly looking Goblin. I think it's a solid 2-drop that draws you a 4-power creature later in the game, and because of that it can be a pretty decent thing. But I could rearrange bits and pieces of that deck in multiple ways. I built this version. I do think that many other versions can exist depending on what was more open. This is, I think, the version that was maybe green was slightly more open than black, but I can see that there are other versions of it, including one that uses a mass to make a big creature and trigger your ferocious strategies. Okay, the deck that I never knew how to build, and I still don't have good confidence. The landfall elves, as it described. And I'm gonna have to do some explaining here in order to tell you what is my thinking behind it, but because it's not normal. Let's go first to the signpost. Mirkwood Nurturer is a 3-mana 3/2, and when it enters, you can return something that other permanent to your hand, and then it gets +1/+1 counter. Which means that if you play this card, you need to think about, okay, what are the cheap things I want to return to my hand? Probably not a land. You don't want to you don't want to deramp yourself, so probably you want to play something. I think that Giant Boulder is one example of things that you can that you might hope to put into the play early. Then the uncommon hybrid is Thranduil, Sindarin Liege. This is a 4-mana 2/3 elf lord, so elves you control get +1/+1, and it has landfall. Whenever land you control enters, create a 1/1 green elf creature token that is obviously a 2/2. It's basically like Bard's Company, but uncommon, which probably is very strong. It's just like, can you survive till that turn? And it also has an adventure part of it that is sort of 3-mana mulch. And the signpost is Sylvan Reveler. That's a 4-mana 3/2. When it enters, you loot. But if you discarded a land, instead of going to the graveyard, you put it on a battlefield tapped. And it is a landfall ability, but only when it's in the graveyard. If it's in the graveyard, it has landfall. You may pay 3 mana to return it from your graveyard to your hand. Which looks like a great engine value generating card, but is expensive. So generally I look at the Thranduil, I look at the Sylvan Reveler, and I'm thinking, damn, this deck, in order to function even, needs to survive. That will explain some of my enablers here. My enablers are not things that enable landfall or enable elves. My cards are the ones that enable you either putting massively bigger things onto the battlefield early or a creature with Death Touch. That's why I think that for the blue-green survival, Attercop is going to be absolutely important. Because if your opponent starts doing those crazy things with their 4/2 4/4 2-drop, or start their game with amassing 3 or put a 3/3 lifelinker dwarf onto the battlefield, lots of those problems are solved by a creature with Death Touch. Also, that creature with Death Touch turns on the only cheap blue-green removal, which is Quarrel, the 2-mana bite spell. So it works great with the Death Toucher. This is why Attercop is here. And the other two things, Woodland Weavemaster, in a deck that is filled with elves, is an extraordinary source of ramp. And, especially with ramping out Thranduil on turn 3, on turn 4 playing a land, and that makes an elf enter the battlefield, and that grows Woodland Weavemaster, which is already grown from Thranduil. You end up with a ton of mana that you can use and maybe splurge out bigger threats that they need to deal with while having other things on board, and making sure that they have to choose between killing Thranduil and something even bigger. So that's how I see that the Weavemaster can work if you have a very elf heavy version of the deck. And similar, Bjord Reluctant Host, the spell that it has as an adventure is 2 mana. You may put a land, you may play an additional land this turn. And that means that this Bjorn lets you curve out from 2 to 4. And then on turn 5, you can cast Bjorn, which is a 5/5 trample. So hopefully that can stem some of the bleeding. but I'm still not sure. And the payoffs I selected are things like Bowside Wanderer, 6 mana 4/4. When this enters, you look at the top 4 cards of your library and you can reveal a permanent card from among those cards and put it in your hand. So basically draw with selection. Only permanents, but probably you're going to play a lot of permanents. And it has landfall. When the land you control enters, this creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. We're going to get there, Carl. We're going to get there, Carl. Carl is asking why Counterspell is a payoff. Okay, second one we have is Laketown Mariners. That's a 6 mana 6/5 vigilance with Ward 2. So a well protected large creature that can beat down while defending you. But also weirdly it has this gone fishing instant adventure. And it's very weirdly worded. And it says exile 2 target creatures and or lands you control, then return them to the battlefield under their owner's control. Now, first of all, I think Laketown Mariner is a good payoff because if you're ramping and surviving, this will ensure your survival. But second of all, I think if you draw it late and you have some landfall things and you have maybe Bowside Wanderers, you can cast the adventure side of it and get a ton of value from it because you can exile Bowside Wanderers and a land, and it will trigger landfall at instant speed, and you will draw an extra card from the Wanderers. Yeah, it might work. And then 6/5 Vigilance Ward 2 is a solid body. And then last thing, and yes, I know that can raise some eyebrows. I put Confusticate and Bebother, 3 mana instant. Choose one, counter target spell unless its controller pays 4, or draw 2 cards, then discard a card. And I do think that ramp allows this counter spell because you can only use that kind of counter spell once you stabilize to control the game. I don't think it's a format when you can just like play a 2-drop and then hope for the counter spell, because you might be already too far behind and this is not good enough. So only way of being able to really benefit from this kind of card like Confusticate and Bebother, or the other recruiting counterspell, or the 6 mana counterspell, or bunch of like expensive card draw spells, is when you stabilize. So those enablers that I selected that are designed to help you stabilize are going to let you play those cards, because you cannot keep you in your mind that on turn 3 I'm just going to leave 3 mana up and then hope that I will counter something. You have to more think, I'm still going to be struggling for my dear life on turn 3, 4, 5, and then on turn 6, if I stabilize correctly, that Confusticate and Bebother is going to be my insurance policy against getting cheesed out by some mythic rare, or is going to be a thing that will dig me deeper into my top end of the deck that can finish the game relatively quickly, because I'm not planning to wait for too long. Having said that, I didn't put in my deck, but what I put 3 Attercops as my 2-drop stabilization package, and 2 Quarrels because they work well with Attercops and with big things that I have on the top of my curve. So either or, it can deal with it. I put also 2 Guardians of the Heath of the Halls, which is a 2 mana elf, and it has 7 mana. You can put 3 +1/+1 counters on it. So it's like, if you somehow draw it late, it can be a big threat. If you draw it early, you just trade it off. I put 1 copy of the elf that taps 4 mana. Just because this is maybe a more elf-heavy package. I have the 2 Guardians. I have the Wood Elves, 1 copy of. I have the Mirkwood Nurturer. I have Thranduil and the Thranduil's Company. and 2 Bowhide Wanderers, which are also elves. So I was hoping, oh yeah, and the Reveler, Sylvan Reveler, also an elf. So I'm hoping, okay, I can at least get sometimes 2 mana out of this card and then speed up my casting of Bowhide Wanderers. Or maybe double spell with like, I don't know, a 3-drop into a 2-drop. So yeah, that's the sort of elf base package. I do have the card selection package because I think that if you're fighting for your survival, it's good that you can generate some bodies that you can trade off with smaller creatures that they have that also generate you some value. So I have Bilbo Baggins Burglar, 2 copies of, 1 copy of, and 2 copies of Patient Instructor, the recruit blue-white signpost, which is just 2 and a blue creature in this particular deck. Also, these are good ETB creatures. So I have one Mirkwood Nurturer. I could bounce the Bilbo and the Wood Elves, and then this Instructor. I can bounce the Giant Boulder. I can bounce the Saga on the later counter. Even later in the game, if I feel particularly adventurous, I can bounce those Bowside Wanderers as well to get some value out of it. This is not like a perfectly designed version of this deck that really wants to be bouncing things back, but sometimes even bouncing your 2-drop to make this a 4-3 that threatens to trade with big things is going to be good enough. Also, I did put Gandalf Wandering Wizard and Bowside Wanderers as my part of my stabilization package that will potentially at some stage let me draw some cards. I had a question in the chat about what of Gandalf. I've seen Gandalf on the other side of the battlefield a couple of times during the pre-releases. In the situation that I was, it was more annoying than anything, so I had to spend a lot of mana to kill it, but I always could because I had 1 mana removal, fortunately, and I could pay the Ward 3. But Ward 3 is a lot. This is a kind of a creature that I drop on turn 5, or maybe even on turn 4 if I ramped out, and I have a good chance of it sitting on that board and surviving at least 1 turn. After which, if they want to point something at Gandalf, I might have 6 mana open, they waste their whole turn, and that actually is quite a good exchange to me. I can deploy a 6-drop, and then they have to choose between killing Gandalf and the 6-drop. So I thought, at least initially, I'm going to give it like a shot. I don't want to have probably more than 1 copy, but it can be an annoying card, and it can be a good way of stabilizing that doesn't make you too worried about removal. Of course, unless they play Cruel Bent Blade, which just makes mockery of Gandalf. But hopefully you have something on board. And I think that the Patient Instructors are partially an insurance policy against the sacrifice thing. I can always sacrifice my 1/1 token instead. And then I have a couple of removal spells, a couple of draw spells. I have Confusticate and Bebother. I have the Frozen in Ice version of this set. And I have Old Fat Spider Count See Me as a sort of like card that both protects me for a couple of turns from the biggest threat and draws me cards to get the answers. Now, do I think it's a great version of the Landfall Elf? I don't know. Probably a good version of Landfall Elves is like 5 rares. And probably you're going to be getting it in week 4 or 5 because it's not going to be drafted so heavily. So maybe you can get the rare package. And maybe that's what the deck really needs to. And maybe it doesn't exist in the format that we decided that the skeletons will be in, because we are limited to 1 rare per deck. And maybe those Landfall Elves are also going to be splashing black because you're going to get Thranduil, and then you're going to get, I don't know, maybe there's a Sultai package that plays at Ravenous Rats, Goblin, whatever, from this set with Mirkwood Nurturer, and then stops offensive decks, not by really blocking the early aggression, but by making sure that once they run out of steam from this early aggression, they don't have anything else in their hand, and then you can take over the game. Maybe that's the way to do it. And then giant boulders are great in that deck because you can bounce them back too with the nurture and then surveil, and then later in the game they stay as your insurance policy against the bomb. But okay, this was the blue-green Landfall Elves. My guess it's going to be the weakest of the 5-color pairs in the first week of the format. Yeah. Then the white-blue. Recruiting humans is the archetype because it has humans and recruit is the mechanic. We already saw Patient Instructor, 3 mana 2/2 vigilance, and then recruit. Eagle's Rescue we also seen. Actually, we saw all of them because I showed them as examples of our signposts. But yeah, I think that particularly interesting is Bard the Bowman. 1/3 reach is a solid body, and then when you draw your second card, you put a +1/+1 counter on something, give it lifelink. And I think that either can put things away from the range of removal. Lifelink can start accumulating some very needed life that you can come back from the game. So I think that Bard can be an asset to those decks. The enablers are going to be, and again, it says recruiting humans, but when you think about that, it probably should play something like a go wide deck that has some going tall capacities in it. And I think that a lot of games that blue-white is going to win are going to end on some kind of a spell that pumps all your team and having a big team. In order to have a big team, So Carl, I think there might be a control version of blue-white. I think there might be, but my worry is how many copies of Majestic Death, Majestic End you need to have in your deck to survive early aggression by your opponent. And how is your life going to look like after that happens? So maybe it does exist, but I'm not gonna at least experiment it in the early days. Okay, so the enablers that I selected are all things that enable you to keep your board wide. And an example of that is Lake Town Lookout, which is a 1 mana 1/1. When it dies, you recruit. So this is something that, when push comes to shove, can chump block something and replace itself while giving you some extra selection. The Mountain King's Return, that's an interesting one. The origin of Avengers, really, when you think about it. 3 mana Saga. You start with recruiting. So you draw a card, you discard a card. Then chapter 2 is you return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So obviously what you want to do is, I play turn 3, the Mountain King's Return, draw a card, discard Patient Instructor. Next turn, my first main phase, Patient Instructor goes back from the graveyard, recruits again, I build this white board, and then hopefully somewhere in between those, I deal with the big threat of the opponent, cast a couple of extra creatures, swing, and pump my team. And like Long Lake Nuisance is another one that allows you to go wide. Weakness, the 2/1 damage sweepers that exist at uncommon in the format are going to be extremely scary when you play blue-white in this way. But if you manage to survive on some life, and I think that you will have to go really low in life, like really using your life total as a resource, taking that damage, as long as it doesn't kill you, just to prepare for one turn, when all of a sudden you swing and the opponent says, "Rrr, rrr," and then you tap 4 mana to cast Thorin's Last Stand, which is your payoff, which is creatures you control gets +2/+1 until end of turn. Maybe you did some chip damage in between. Maybe they paid a couple of life for their Prowler thing, whatever. And then you managed to sneak through just enough creatures to just kill them out of nowhere in a go white way. But it's going to be a risky deck to play, and a deck that you really need to think, should I block or should I preserve my width of the board in order so I can make this last huzzah? Another payoff that I selected is the Lakeshore Apothecary, because yeah, you are going wide, but your recruiting doesn't only mean that you're going wide, it also means that you're drawing multiple cards a turn. And Lakeshore Apothecary can actually make a pretty good use of it and is a vigilant creature. So if I curve out, Lakeshore Apothecary is a 2-mana 1/2 with vigilance, and when you draw your second card each turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. So let's say I played turn 2, turn 3 I played the Mountain King's Return, I recruit, draw a second card, it becomes a 2/3. Probably has decent attacks. I can swing with it, it's vigilant, it stays for blocks. Turn 4, my Patient Instructor returns, and say I discard the Think Thrice, the spell that you can flash back to draw 2 cards. Now my Apothecary is a 3/4. I don't cast anything, end of their turn, I cast the draw 2, it grows again. It becomes a big creature. So this is one way that I can do a different strategy slightly, when I can grow tall my creature by just doing multiple draw. Plunder the Trollshaws, by the way, is the spell that I was talking about. I can grow my Lakeshore Apothecary tall, and if it survives, big if, then I have a plan B. And another plan B is the Eagle of the Great Shelf, which is another good blocker, 2/5, would be hard to kill, but more importantly, an evasive attacker that hits like a ton of bricks, because when it attacks, it gains +1/+1 until end of turn for each other creature you control. So a lot of the times it will attack as a 6/8, 6/9, 6/9. There you go. The Dream to attack as a 6/9, maybe even 7/10. And then of course there are some key cards. I think that Lake Time Maker might be good in some versions of the deck that will have a lot of recruit or other draw synergies. It is a 4-mana 3/4 at the beginning of combat on your turn. If you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, target creature you control gets +3/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn. I don't like how they build this card. I think that they sort of hosed it a bit, because there is a looter Bilbo at uncommon that draws a card when they attack, and this will be too late for the Lake Town Toy Maker to trigger, because it only triggers as at the beginning of combat. Probably because they don't want an onboard trick to be active. But this card would have been so much better if it only triggered on your turn, but anytime you draw your second card, target creature gets +3/+0 and first strike. As it is right now, maybe it's just too underpowered to be good, but I think white-red is good in Exile Nexus. I think white-red is on par, not because of white though. So yeah, we might agree it's a Junt format. Okay, so here is the deck that I built, and this is my survival package: Lakeshore Apothecary and Magnificent End, whichever I draw first. Lakeshore Apothecary on turn 2 builds me up to my multiple free drop recruit things, so it will grow next turn and hopefully become a big enough blocker to at least stem the bleeding. And Magnificent End is great to destroy a tapped creature anytime I need to. Then, yeah, my drawing a card on third turn for the Apothecary / building my whiteboard Patient Instructor Bilbo Baggins Burglar kind of package. And then we have the Boost the Whole Team package in Moment of Glory. That's another card I didn't mention, but it's white for a sorcery, put a counter on target creature you control. If the spell was cast from a graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control as well for 5 mana. So it can pump the whole team. I don't think it's as good as Thorin's Last Stand in attacking, but it has a bit of utility early, because you can sometimes boost one of the creatures to be big enough to be a blocker that opponent cannot attack through. And then on top of that, we have the Fili the Pathfinder as a go wide rare. I have Esgaroth Garrison, the 5 mana X5 that has power equal to the number of creatures, and it recruits when it enters for 5 mana. Stone by Sunlight as a removal. Celebrate the Mountain King as a removal, the Oblivion Ring, but also a recruit source. And Plunder the Troll Shows, which is Think Thrice. And 2 Lake Town Lookouts, the 1-drops that will die into recruit trigger. Yeah, I'm just afraid that like relying on 1/1s as a defense force is going to end with someone casting Gnashing of Teeth and you rolling over and dying instantly almost. Especially with Bilbo being such a key creature that also has 1 toughness, and then those Long Lake nuisances also having 1 toughness. It's like a lot of 1 toughness there. That's true, it is spending mana, but if it's spending mana to get rid of 4 of your things and then attacking, that's probably a well spent mana. Okay, and I think that blue-white has at least promising ideas there. I really will be interested in seeing after week 1 how good are those Lakeshore Apothecaries. My feeling is that it's going to be one of the key blue-white cards in the set. And if I'm wrong, then I totally didn't get it, how this archetype wants to be working. So if this card is rubbish, then I don't understand blue-white and it works in a different way. So we're going to see how my understanding of the format was very quickly by that particular 2-drop. Okay. Next archetype is white-red Storied Dwarves. Why Storied? Because Storied is the mechanic of dwarves. The signpost of the hybrid common is Nori, Teller of Tales, one of the dwarves. Whenever Nori attacks, target attacking creature gains first strike until end of turn. So a lot of the time it's going to be a 2/2 first strike. But I did have that already, that my opponent was at 7 life and they had 2 creatures that can block my 8/8 Amass army and kill it. And they had to block it. And I just attacked with Nori on top of that and gave my Amass first strike. And then instead of trading their 2 things with my army, they had to actually sacrifice one of them and still double block basically because it had menace. So it's a pretty good card with a bit of flexibility there and quite an annoying attacker in the deck. Then we have Bifur Melodic Rider. And here is my public service announcement, yeah? Be wary of that with Bifur and Thorin Oakenshield when you play tomorrow on Arena. So Bifur Melodic Rider is 4 hybrid red-white, hybrid red-white for a dwarf with Storied. And whenever Bifur enters or attack, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. As long as you have an enduring story, which will often be the case for a 6-drop in the white-red deck, if an ability of a dwarf you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. That's 1. So first of all, on the basis of it, Bifur enters, you have Storied, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and this ability triggers the second time because you will have Storied most of the time. So you put 2 counters, which makes it a 6/7. Yes, it's not 2005. I actually bashed my daughter for using 6/7 recently. I said, what are you, a millennial? So yeah, the basis of the Bifur is those double triggers. But it will also, for example, trigger Nori's attack trigger twice. So you will have 2 first strike creatures, which is nice. But we move on to a card called Thorin Oakenshield. And Thorin Oakenshield, and there are a couple of other things that do that to dwarves in this particular set, is a 2 mana, 3/2 trample, and it's also Storied. And if you have Enduring Story, Artifacts and creatures you control have ward 1. Now, if you have B4 on the battlefield and Thorin Oakenshield on the battlefield, not if opponent has, ward is a triggered ability. So you may think that I have whatever 5 mana, I can use my 4 mana removal to kill B4 because I will be able to pay ward. But ward will trigger twice, so you need extra payment for that. And on Arena, of course, you see the card has a ward, but maybe you don't see that it will trigger twice and you will bamboozle yourself. So this is my public service announcement. Don't be the person that casts something to target B4 when it has ward 1 with 1 mana in their mana pool, just to see double trigger of the ward triggers. Yep. Okay. Let's not fall into that trap. I'll make a Twitter short note on it tomorrow. Because I would have, if not for my student in the coaching session when we were discussing the we were looking through the spoiler basically to train some evaluation skills, and then my student taught me that word is a triggered ability. Great. Oh, there you are, Dennis. Nice. See, I give you credit. I gave you credit. There you go. I don't pretend that I came up with it all by myself. It's all about attribution. It's all about attribution in the modern world. There will be people who are successful because they never attribute, and there will be people who are not successful because they actually attribute to the correct source what they've done in their life. Anyway, what are the enablers? Well, in theory, I selected enablers that are things that are enabling storied. Because if you trigger the storied and you get the enduring story, you're gaining extra benefits from every card that you're playing, or a lot of the cards that you're playing, and this is a good thing. So things like Dwarven Shortsword, 4 mana, 3/4 creature, but it comes as an attached equipment on a 2/2 really, and it leaves behind, when the creature dies, it leaves behind an equipment that is equipped for 2 and gives +1/+2. That counts to storied because it's an artifact. Oin the Brave, 2 mana, 1/3, storied itself, and is a legendary creature. And as long as you have the enduring story, it's a 2/3 haste that has 1 mana, tap, Ramage. Burn, Tree and Fern, 4 mana saga with 4 chapters. That will hang around on the battlefield for long enough to probably help you with the story. Now, I could also say Urza's Saga is a great enabler for storied because 3rd chapter triggers your artifact that you looked for, comes up the battlefield, so you have 2 things for storied at the same time. However, Urza's Saga has not been there. AI Zia, nice. Likewise, I'm sometimes lurking when you're doing stuff, so it's 1-1. What are going to be your payoffs? And I think that the payoffs will have to focus on 2 key aspects of white-red. 1, dwarves, 2, equipment. I think that these are the defining features of the color pair, because they will also let you compete with black-red and green-black on the axis of we're having an amazing curve out. And I think the first card that is going to be important is Dwarven Mattock. I think that a good white-red deck will be the deck that also wants to have a Dwarven Mattock. And Dwarven Mattock is an equipment, 2 mana. It gives something +2/+2 and ward 1. Remember the B4 thing? Yeah. And it equips for 3 mana, which is pretty expensive, but not like horribly expensive also. But when it enters, you can attach it for free to a dwarf. So a curve out of turn 1 dwarf, say Bofur, a Reliable Guardian, which is a 1 mana 1/1 with lifelink, into Dwarven Mattock, gives you a 3/3 lifelinker attacking on turn 2. That's a good curve out. So this is what you're going to be sort of trying to aim at in those games. Or things that are really good by being equipped, like Iron Hills Blacksmith, which is a 2 mana 1/1 double striker. And when it enters, you create an equipment artifact token named Axe with equipped creature gets +1/+0 and equip 2. Okay, this is not a great equipment, but it does create an artifact for story, and Iron Hills Blacksmith wears equipment very well. Normally, the problem with things like Iron Hills Blacksmith is that it's laughable when someone casts a shock on it. But as we realized very quickly here, there is no shock in this format. And also, like Iron Hills Blacksmith with a Mattock and maybe something else, now it's a 3/3 double striker with ward, and there's still this axe lying around somewhere that you can put on top of it to make it a 4/3. And that can be a scary curve. Not only that, you're also the red deck that can have Pinecone Strike that can clear out some of the blockers early. By the way, also remember that the Pinecone Strike will kill the Iron Hills Blacksmith axe very easily as well if you want to. And other things that will be useful in this deck, things like Bombur, the Gentle Dreamer. I don't know, was he depicted as a gentle dreamer in the books? I think he was generally depicted as someone with an obesity problem and uncontrolled hunger. But okay, Gentle Dreamer, let's call him. A 3-mana 5/3 with Storied. And Bombur does not untap during your untap step unless you have an Enduring Story. So first of all, decent blocker for 3 mana, but you will hopefully it will be so easy to get this Enduring Story, and then you just get basically a 5/3 for 3 mana, which is not a bad deal. Especially when you can boost it with things like Dwarven Mattock and then make it a 7/5 that is a really problematic thing to block. Nexile Nexus. I didn't put... I'm thinking which one is that? I don't think I have it in my deck, but yeah, I know what you mean. There's a 3/2, 3 mana that makes a treasure, and it has trample. And Nexile Nexus is asking, is the 3/2 good in that strategy? Because trample and equipment is a good combination. And probably yes. Also, it makes 2 things for storage, so you basically trigger it on its own if you have anything that has storied while you cast it. So for this reason, it might be a decent thing, and it's a common. Is it Bane, Dwellin? I don't remember which one is that. So probably yes, in some of the builds of the deck it will be good. In my particular, I didn't put it, but I could see it being there. But I also wanted to showcase, sometimes I build those decks not specifically to be a deck, but to showcase the cards that I think it's important to talk about. It's a fine balance between those two. And as I said, like the key cards, Dori, okay. Pinecone Strike is going to be a key card. Generally, I think it's one of the most important cards in the format, mainly because how I think early aggression is going to be important, and at the same time, cheap interaction is very, very limited in the format. The other card that I think is a key card is the Rugged Short Spear, because it's a Tormenting Voice, which gives you this capability of doing a bit of card selection. I don't think that the white-red deck wants to do too many lands, so having something like Rugged Short Spear is going to be interesting to have. And also it's an artifact for storage, and the equipment that gives +2/+0, which will work with something like with Nori. You equip Nori, you attack with the 4/2 first striker. What are they blocking with? Apart from Ordinary Bear. And I think Bofur is an important card. Because turn 1/1 lifelink will be the key for your most heinous curve outs. But also 2, because the adventure of him, which gives something hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, is going to be important in some games. And then you can deploy Bofur after that. So here's my deck. I built it super aggro skewed. I don't think that this is the only way of building it, but that's how I built it. And I wanted to amplify the absolutely sick curve outs. So I am playing Bofur, Reliable Guardian, and Dwarven Mauler, red for 2/1 that equips things equipped to it for 2 less. So for example, if I play Bofur into Matok and then I play Dwarven Mauler somewhere later, I can always move Matok to the Dwarven Mauler for just 1 mana. Great. And then I also put 2 copies of Tidings of War, a card that I didn't discuss yet, because it's technically a red-black card, but I do think that white-red can make a half decent use of another card, Goblin Plate Mail. Tidings of War is red to amass 1, and then it has a flashback for 4 mana to amass 3. But if you turn 1 amass 1 and turn 2 cast Goblin Plate Mail, which says when it enters, amass 1 and then attach the Goblin Plate Mail to the amassed army, now you have a 2/2 Goblin army that can attack this turn, that gets +1/+0 and Menace. So you get a 3/2 Menace that can attack on turn 2, which is a pretty good curve out as well. And the Goblin Plate Mail serves part of your mission because it is counting for the story. So, and then later you can put Tidings of War again, and then you have a big thing. And also I play the Misty Mountain Raider in this deck, which is a 5-drop that when you attack you amass extra 2. And yeah, that's another sort of pathway to a good curve out. What I have is a bunch of 2-drops. I have the Dwarven Provisioner, which is a 2/2 that for 4 mana pumps the whole team. I have Nori, the first striker. I have Thorin Oakenshield, the 3/2 with trample. 2 Pinecone Strikes, 1 Stone by Sunlight. The Short Spear that I told that ramages. And then some top end. I have an Unexpected Party, busted white rare that makes some dwarves, and there's a double anthem for a creature type you choose, which probably will be dwarves in this. The O-Ring, the equipment that makes a goblin, and Burn, Tree, and Fern. And at the top end, I have Bifur Melodic Rider. I think that card is a good way of topping up the curve, because if you get your storied by then, you might have lost your other dwarves, and then Bifur just comes as a massive creature, and that needs to be dealt with because it will trigger again. Or if you have already something that is active, you just put the counters on the other thing, and they have to deal with it, or they deal with both Bifur, and they need to, make sure that this happens right now, because you cannot let it be active for multiple turns. And this Misty Mountain Raider, I also put it in because I think that generating those extra bodies is important in a color pair that is not really having that much of a card advantage in it. So there we go with the white-red. And we come to the last color pair, black-red amassing goblins. And I will be very surprised if that doesn't come up as a top color combination after the first week of the format. I'm going to be recording that on Saturday, but I'm pretty sure that this is how it's going to work out. Black-red is going to be on top, and potentially by a margin. I think that it is a combination of multiple things. It has good synergy pieces, powerful cards on their own. The decks that I built could have been aggressive, but also could have been long game grindy with a lot of tools to gain card advantage late in the game. Removal was the best of all the color combinations and could attack opponents on multiple levels. I think one weak spot was dealing with artifacts that was not really there, and I did run into the problem of people cheesing me out with my precious almost. Having said that, yeah, almost. I mean, I went 12-0 in games in the 2 pre-releases I played, so no one really got there, but some people were close. And artifacts was one of the problems. Rest of the things I could deal with quite easily. And it also has things like down to Goblin Town, which can deal with preemptively with a hand while progressing your plan, because it does exactly what you want to be doing. So the signpost, we mentioned Goblin Plate Mail. 2/1 menace is a good thing. It leaves behind an equipment, and the 2/1 can become a 3/2 haste if you cast Tidings of War on turn 1. So a lot of things to like. That card did amazing jobs to me for in my first pre-release. I moved it multiple times despite the cost of 4 mana, just to push some more damage later in the game when I had the mana. And also, a lot of spells in this format, like Stir Up Trouble, say as an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature. Which means if Goblin Plate Mail falls off your army because it was killed and you don't have anything to do with it, you can easily just sacrifice it and get some value out of it, either to this or to another card that I'm going to have my skeleton. And this is the thing that I think that Black-Red will exist. The card collection looks to me so good that it will exist in several flavors of it, and you need to, like, your homework for the first week of the format is to do the homework of learning what builds of Black-Red exist and which cards should I go. Because I'm pretty sure that there are red-black decks that have Fearsome Goblin Pair as one of their best cards. That's the 3-mana 1/1 that when it dies you amass goblins for. And there will be Black-Red decks that probably are not too interested in playing that card. And my first pre-release deck was, I was extremely interested in playing Fearsome Goblin Pair. It was absolutely amazing. I had Sackville Bagginses that I could sacrifice it. I had Izog that I could sacrifice it to. I had another Rovanian something, the 3/2 that gets bigger when you sacrifice a creature, and you can sacrifice a creature at the beginning of your combat. I had Stir Up Trouble in it, and there was a lot of things that I wanted to sacrifice, and it worked great. And the second day was more straightforward aggro and some top end, but without all the sacrifice synergies, and it was not like that amazing. Okay, the signpost uncommon is Bulk of the North, which I put as in my pick 0, pick 1, as my top signpost of the format. And not only because I think Black-Red is going to be the strongest color, I think that this is also the strongest of the signposts. It's a 5-mana 5/5. When it enters, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, Bulk deals damage equal to that creature's power to another target creature. If excess damage was dealt through that, you amass Goblins X, where X is the amount of the excess damage. And I had it often that I had like a, even I had the, what's the name? That was a pretty good combo when I had Desolation Prowler. I use the ability, I make it into a 4/4. I cast Bolg, I kill their 3/2. I deal 2 excess damage. I amass 2 extra on top of my already large army, and I get a 5/5 out of this deal. This card is sort of Killmonger in disguise, and then sometimes you will just cast it as a vanilla 5/5 if you need it, so there is that flexibility as well. I think it's going to be pretty strong, and there's many combinations of things you want to be sacrificing and things that you can sacrificing. The ability to sacrifice your big army to make it slightly smaller, but still pretty big probably, is another option. The enablers we have, I picked 3 cards that amass at turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. Turn 1, Tidings of War, to create pressure on the opponent. You amass 1, and then later on turn 4 you can further amass 3. Goblin Town Flunkies, one of the curve-out cards, where you go Tidings of War into Goblin Town Flunkies. Goblin Town Flunkies is a 2-mana 1/1 with haste, but you also amass 1, which means that if you cast Tidings on turn 1, you end up with a 1/1 haste and a 2/2 army that can also attack. So you swing for 3. Another example of turn 2, I swing for 3 situation that I think is going to be quite commonplace. Third one is Rage into the Valley. That's 3 mana, lose 1 life, and draw a card, and amass 2. So it's a Phyrexian Rager, therefore the name Rage into the Valley. See, the design team makes jokes about magic in the universes beyond sets. And this one will let you, this is one of those first cards that lets you continue putting the pressure while getting the value and progressing your board. Also, two of those are non-creature spells, which I think that Bothersome Noisemaker is going to be a great payoff for, because that will sort of like turn Tidings of War into Amass 2, because whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Amass Goblins 1. Stir Up Trouble is a great card that will be a payoff for playing what you're doing. You cast your Goblin Town Flunkies, you end up with a 1/1 haste, maybe not relevant late in the game. Perfect thing to sacrifice to stir up trouble. There is also Ravenous Rats in the set. There is also a bunch of equipment that have an ETB. There is also Fearsome Goblin Pair. For me, there will be decks that want 3 copies of Stir Up Trouble easily in this set. And there will be decks that want maybe 1, depending on what you're gonna get. Okay, some other things that I think are important. Crude Bent Blade, another thing that can help those 1/1s that you have left behind into 3/2s that actually can do some damage. Obviously Pinecone Strike, and I think that down to Goblin Town is going to be absolutely amazing in those decks, because it's, when you think about it, in the recent sets, cards like the Lizard, the 2/2 Lizard from Bloomborough, that when you dealt damage on the turn, turned into a look at opponent's hand, pick a non-land card from it and discard it, was a great card. It had Menace, it was a 2/2 Menace. This is not a 2/2 Menace. This is a 1/1 because it amasses 1 on the second chapter. But it does have an ability of another historically great card, and historically great card when Black-Red was the best archetype as well. Vampire Spawn. 3 mana, 2/3, enters, drain 2. Down to Goblin Town will eventually drain 2. So we have a combination of those 2 great cards. Claw was another of those discard cards, another great card, even though Black was not good in that in Marvel Superheroes. But we have a combination of those 2 cards, where we basically have a 1/1 Vampire Spawn that also discards a card that you choose. And if your opponent is struggling to survive and struggling to stabilize the game, combination of the stuff that down to Goblin Town lets you do is just incredible. You just cast it, you know exactly, you pick up the most annoying thing that they have, and then you know what else is coming, so you can plan accordingly. And yeah, I really love this type of card, and I think it's going to be pretty strong as well. Okay, so here is my build of the Black-Red Amass Goblins. I start with 2 Tidings of War, but I would be probably happy playing 3 or 4. The fact that, it's just not a 1-drop. Like, if it was a 1-drop, I would not be so keen on those. But the 4 mana Amass 3 thing, often is hasty, is really annoying. And there is no way of like permanently getting rid of the army under some kind of a pacifism. So, because the Frozen and Ice version removes all the counters from the permanent that you have, so you won't be, the creature will die, so you can amass from scratch, means that I can put many copies of that because it has relevance later into the game, and it's not that I'm going to draw a 1-drop that does nothing later in the game, which makes me really hopeful that this is one of the better commons in the set. In fact, I put it as my wildcard common in the Pack 0 Pick 1 competition. Also, Rage into the Valley is another card that I put in there as my value engine that promotes further pushing of the damage. On top of that, I put this sacrifice package here. In Stony Voiced Goblins, that's the Ravenous Rat, the Varus Beetle, whatever you call it. 2 mana, 1/1, each opponent discards a card. Putting extra strain on what opponent is doing. Yes, they might discard a land, whatever. You play it early. I don't care. You should be in the situation when any resource that they lose is going to be in your advantage. And you're gaining that 1/1 that you can use to your Stir Up Trouble, for example. And here the same with the Fearsome Goblin Pair, a card that you're happy to sacrifice and generate value out of it. And I put some Sacrifice package, there's many more cards that can make good use of it. Stir Up Trouble is the first one, that's the obvious one. Black for a removal spell as an additional cost to cast it. Either sacrifice an artifact or a creature or pay 4 mana to destroy target creature. This can generate such a tempo swing because you have your stupid stony voiced goblins and you remove their big blocker that was their load-bearing pillar of their defense system, and you still have mana to play with to do something else on that turn, and it can end pretty badly. Like you have a 2/2 army on turn 4, you pay 1 mana, sacrifice your stony voiced goblins, kill the big blocker, 3 mana, cast Rage into the Valley, draw a card, make your army a 4/4. Now they don't have good blocks, now you attack. What are they going to do about it? And same goes with like sacrificing the Fearsome Goblin pair and amassing 4, just making this massive creature out of it. I think that, also the great ugly looking goblin, my namesake for this episode, is great for that because you have to think about this card as a 2-drop that draws you a 6-drop later in the game. The 2 mana amass 2 is just a perfectly serviceable 2-drop, and you get the 6-drop later, and the menace can be quite annoying. A card that I was having in both of my pre-release decks and was working amazingly well in both of them was the Snowslope Hunter. A lot of the time I had a leftover 1/1 in Stony Voiced Goblins or the Hasty Creature or leftover Goblin Plate Mail, or I was just running out of steam and maybe needed something and I had the Crude Bent Blade, the sacrifice a creature equipment as well, or just random treasure somewhere and I can sacrifice it to draw a card. Not only that, any removal during my turn, I can easily sacrifice a thing, and I literally did it twice as a response to Settle the Wreckage. Just sacrificed the creature I was attacking with just to get that extra value instead of a land. Obviously, at least one of those times I did hit a land, but it's the intention that counts. It could have been a spell. And then on top of that, Bulk of the North, which is great with those creatures you want to be sacrificing, and great with large armies, which you're generating in this deck, sort of, by the way. But this is one of the builds. This is one of the potential builds of the Black-Red. And I'm pretty sure there's other builds that are very different from it. I will see a build that is more focusing on some, I don't know, ferocious, or building, or the Crude Bent Blades being great in that particular build. Or more controlling version. Or actually, I think that if I was building a Splishy Splashy deck, that would be red-black centric with potential some green additions or some white additions. And I think that, I would approach this format as most of the fixing, and we talked about it early, is actually colorless. So why not build a Mardu deck rather than thinking automatically, almost because we are so used to it, that a 5-color deck has to have green. Green fixing is not that great in this set. Treasures are in red, and colorless stuff like the ponies or Giant's Boulder or whatever are in colorless. You can play them in any color, so why not a Mardu deck? So don't get limited to this design. I think that sky is almost the limit in how you build Black-Red. And this brings me back to AFR, a format that I actually liked, where Black-Red was outrageously powerful, potentially even more powerful than in this set. And I spent the first 3 weeks of that format meticulously trying different philosophies of building Black-Red decks. I always was forcing Black-Red, don't get me wrong, but in the end I came with like 4 different builds that were specifically wanting different cards. And it was actually a fun process to do it, because it was more like philosophical deck building rather than limited, but I was winning a lot, and I was winning a lot because I understood that certain cards belong in certain homes, And I'm pretty sure that in this format as well, there is going to be an element of that. You're drafting in pick 2 draft. You know that there are, even in pick 2, there are 2 black-red decks per pod. Make sure that you draft the right one that is open and not the one that you're competing for. So yeah, it might give you some kind of advantage. So yeah, I'm going to put those slides tomorrow on my Patreon, but don't you worry, the skeleton slides are always available to everyone. And this is a good opportunity for you to join my Patreon for free and then have notifications that I posted something, which happens from time to time. But yeah, skeleton presentations, you go to the Patreon and you see my post, and this is one that I've always put for free, accessible to you. Then you can look through my decks, whatever. What else? Yeah, enjoy tomorrow. Remember that before makes the word trigger twice. Don't fall into that trap. And then have fun playing the new format. And don't get negative because red and black is strong, which I think it will be. Use it as an opportunity of figuring out things. I think that people would be much better off if, instead of complaining about format not being balanced, they would try to figure out how to abuse that situation to their favor, because it's a more productive way. Yeah, and with that, there's a slide from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles there for some reason. And with that, I'll see you not even in a week, because on Saturday I'm planning to make the early data episode, when I will be, I don't know, I'm going to have a pile of ash next to me, and I'm going to put it on top of my head, saying that I was so wrong. Who knew that blue-green is the most busted thing since sliced bread? Everyone is all about Thranduil and elves and whatever. Probably not, though. Probably we're going to be saying, yeah, black-red is good. Who knew? Okay. And with that, I'll see you on Saturday. Bye-bye.